Jamie, welcome to WealthChat. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Before we get started, please introduce yourself.
Sure. My name's Jamie Reed. I am the founder and CEO of the Bright Birch Collective, which is a global network of over 200 marketing experts who we bring together around big client assignments and projects to try to help solve their business challenges.
Well, sounds amazing. And I suppose I am curious about marketing, particularly in today's society when our attention spans are not where they used to be. So let's start with how are firms trying to market more effectively to be it be the younger generation or even like some of the older generations who have so much information coming at them constantly?
Yeah. I mean, there's just all the channels these days. I think there's just so much choice. A lot of companies, a lot of people, individuals, anybody that's trying to market themselves, I think they don't always know where to go, how to reach people. What we're finding a lot more is that community building is a really great way to actually start to have other people sort of talk about you and build sort of these communities around your products and brands and stuff like that. And I think younger generations really value being with people like themselves. And similarly, I think the digital channels allow us to target much more specifically. So what we're finding is the same company might have the same broad message, but then targeting it more specifically using language, using images, using a much more targeted approach depending on who they're talking to. So if you go to LinkedIn, you're likely more talking to more business people. If you're going to TikTok, it's skewing more young. So you have to just kind of be really smart about that.
So there's a lot of customization. The idea of just sending out flyers to everyone is not really there.
Something like the Super Bowl is still like this mass opportunity to get in front of so many people. So I think there still are those moments where you want to have, one big message, but I think you have to be smart about what you're trying to achieve through those kinds of messages, because it's not necessarily going to, drive everyone to do the same action. So you have to have, a lot of outlets from those big platforms. But yeah, primarily everyone is targeting, and I think a lot of AI tools now are allowing people to do that with the click of a button. So you don't have to sit there and craft 20 messages. I think, ChatGPT can do it for you now.
Well, let's actually talk about AI and ChatGPT. So when I look at AI and ChatGPT and all these other language models, my focus has, of course, been on how they're helping different businesses cut out redundancy, duplications, but I haven't really thought about the marketing side of it. So can you speak a bit about what you're seeing and where you feel some of the potential lies?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that new, to be honest. I think in the agencies and a lot of, the MarTech space, there's been a lot of AI for a while now. What we're seeing now, though, is that same that happened to music studios, right? They all of a sudden became in people's living rooms, and so now anyone can produce their own music. It's kind of the same sort of thing where you have these super powerful marketing tools now that anyone can use. So that's really, it's the democratization, I think, of marketing that is sort of opening up new opportunities, and we're starting to see a lot of really great creativity coming from people that aren't necessarily traditional marketers, but are just playing with these tools. And so that's been really interesting to see. But in terms of what the future of the industry holds and how people will react, I mean, it's a little bit early to say, but you can expect that if you're a copywriter, if you're someone who does certain things that tend to be more transactional and not as on the creative side, like it could be the writing might be on the wall for you in terms of the future. But I think, the smart writers are already using these tools, and I think they're not good enough to replace good writing. They're not, the image ones aren't good enough to replace good photographers or good creatives. So they're really good for brainstorming and sort of getting some ideas on paper, but then I think they haven't replaced people yet.
That's interesting. Well, I think of ChatGPT where it might do some of your market research for you, right? So I can just ask ChatGPT, hey, I have X product. How do I effectively market to this segment? Or actually, who would use this product to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, so we use it for a lot of research. Again, it doesn't replace actual market research, but if you're building customer personas, for example, to kind of think about, again, the channels you want to go and the user journey. It's a great place to start, right? And they'll ChatGPT can spin up personas really, really easily, actually, and do them in a way that you can actually, even put yourself in the voice of your customer too. So you can ask ChatGPT, well, how would you respond if you were a 16-year-old, boy versus a 60-year-old boy, right? And just, it's getting really smart. Still not perfect, but it's getting closer and closer all the time.
It sure is. And I don't know, I just feel that there's an endless amount of possibilities for what these technologies can be used for because of how versatile they are and that they can be applicable to really any industry, which is quite amazing. Now, you mentioned writers and how some of them are already employing it and some aren't. I'm curious to know from a marketer standpoint, do you feel that it's eroding creativity in some ways?
I think people who don't understand what true creativity maybe is, right? Being creative isn't just putting whatever you want down on paper necessarily. Like that could be a form of creativity, but when you talk about creative in the advertising or marketing sense, there's a lot of effort and thought, and the creatives I've worked with in my career have always been very, they have their own processes. They'll go away for weeks and really think through ideas and test and play with all these different ideas. Then they'll refine them. So it's to do it right is still a process. Can you get something that's pretty darn good in a short period of time? Yeah, I mean it gets you 80% there, maybe 90, maybe soon it'll be 100%, but it gets you there faster in terms of some of that process. But it still won't replace the true creatives yet. And in fact, we do work with some designers and some creatives and some writers that their clients are telling them, actually, can you not use any AI, because they don't want to be, brands and companies don't want to be caught up in some of the IP issues that we're seeing as well through some of these models. So that's something to look out for too. I think the authenticity of humans doing the work is a bit of a backlash, and I think it might be something that's going to be more popular this year.
That's really interesting. I thought it might also be that they want the human touch instead of just having a machine generate some logos or images for them.
I mean, there's a part of that. I think there's a respect for the craft, right? That I think people want to maintain. They want people to be paid for the good work they do. And similarly, I think there's still that human voice. There's still that element of creativity that you can't really replicate. Like if you play enough with these tools, you can kind of tell who's using it and who's not. So it's not quite all there yet. And I think a lot of brands and creatives and people that are using these tools are sometimes actually purposely not using them, putting a little disclaimer saying that no AI was used in this copywriting, or no AI was used in this ad. And I think that that is we're going to see more of that, I think.
Yeah, that seems really interesting, and I feel like I've had several conversations now surrounding AI, and I feel it always comes back to creating that harmony between human and machine and leveraging these technologies to enhance the output versus just eliminating a certain input, maybe at the human touch, or it might be a certain process. So I feel like there's a lot of potential here. I do want to speak a bit also about social media. And so, can you speak a bit about what you're seeing in terms of marketing and social media, and how firms, maybe even startups, are starting to employ these technologies to their advantage, or platforms?
What we're seeing, with the market sort of turning a little bit downwards, we're seeing a lot more companies wanting to have a clear ROI on, I think, their marketing spend. And so a lot of these channels on the back end are doing a lot more to provide the metrics, to provide the dashboards and the opportunity for companies and brands to be able to sort of manage that. But what we're really seeing is sort of what we call revenue operations, and bringing more of the marketing and sales teams closer together. And so we're seeing a lot more content that's being co-created with the sales and marketing teams. in a way that is more, I guess, measurable to an actual sales. And I think that really helps the marketers themselves to kind of maintain, they're not just going back to their bosses saying, hey, I've got, so many likes and clicks. They're going back and saying, hey, we've driven this much business. And it's a different kind of conversation that I think marketers are trying to have now with in the businesses.
That 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 sounds logical that you would have sales be a part of marketing because sales is usually the force on the ground who are interacting. So now getting them involved in that process seems like the right way to do things, in my opinion. But when I think about social media and how that has even changed or evolved the landscape, even when it comes to marketing or even consumer behaviors, the fact that people will go to social media now for things like reviews and to see if how other people react to certain products. And how has that sort of changed the strategy or shifted things a bit for firms when it comes to using those platforms and when it comes to being a bit more creative versus just having some traditional techniques?
Yeah, there's just a lot of noise, right? Like
Yeah.
everyone thinks that what they have to say is the most important thing, right? And if it's like a real, you know, company message and it's all about a product and it's too salesy, I mean, we try to tell our clients that, it's maybe, what's in it for the audience, right? Is the question that we ask a lot. And why should they care? So I would say that, to cut through the noise, that's where creativity really does help. Creating something that people will pay attention to in their short attention span as they're flicking through videos that are super short. So trying to create something that is sticky, that people want to share, that people want to, maybe rehash and that's one thing that we're actually seeing a lot more of that I think companies also have to get used to is you put your content out there, someone might take it, they might splice it, they might, do something funny with it. It might not be on brand, but that's part of the community aspect of this, right? Because now more people are talking about it and it's getting more exposure. So you have to, companies need to be a bit more relaxed a little bit if they're going to start doing stuff in social, because I think with the younger generations, nothing's sacred, and so they're willing to, play around and have fun with your content. You have to be ready for that.
That makes sense. And I'm sure that there are some firms or some industries that are a lot more traditional and who may be having a bit of a difficult time keeping up right now. So, what would you, I guess, besides being a bit more relaxed, what would you recommend to those types of firms?
Yeah. So I've worked a lot in pharma and healthcare, and a lot of my clients, I helped them get into social media, and it was very tough, right? Dealing with the lawyers and dealing with the procurement and dealing with everyone that wanted to say, no, we can't be in social, we can't do that. Well, now you can't not be in social. So somehow we figured out a way to do it. I think trying to find the people within organizations that are more willing to say yes than to say no and give it a shot. And, everything in moderation, test and learn, I think is the best way forward. But don't just say no. I think the more you can experiment, the more you can try. You never know. Some platforms will come and they'll die a week later. Some platforms, if you're one of the first ones on there and it ends up being a really popular platform, you're kind of like trailblazer. So you see the companies that win in the marketing game tend to be at the forefront and not at the back on the back foot.
Right. And especially if you're trying to get the younger generation, Gen Z or Gen Alpha, I think is the
Yeah.
youngest one now. They essentially live on social media. So how else are you going to get their attention?
Yeah, it's what's interesting is we're seeing that there's a pushback from the Gen Alphas and stuff. Like they're getting flip phones. They're trying to move. They're seeing their parents, the boomers, and everything like on their phones all the time. And I think they're rebelling against that a little bit. So it's interesting to see. There's going to be sort of, I think, two camps in the world. We're going to see people that just want to live in the forest and, touch grass all the time and just be sort of detached from the digital world. And there's be people like we're seeing now who are wearing VR headsets on subways and walking down the street, right? So the world's gonna sort of split probably into the technophobes and the technologists who really embrace the technologies. And I think a lot of that comes down to also just how much media we have to consume, and people are getting overloaded. People are right. So I think detaching is not a bad thing. So finding the right balance, and companies that are recognizing that and have like a wellness sort of angle to what they're trying to do, I think they're trying to find balance between pushing too much out there and pushing the right things out there.
That makes sense, and I feel digital burnout is a very real thing. So it's interesting to hear that even I suppose there's a perception that, oh, if you're young, you're just all about the internet and social media. And perhaps it is time that we start looking to break that and say, okay, no, we can't really just put them in masses based on age group. There are different preferences within those brackets. But the idea that because they're seeing what I suppose technology and social media has done to their parents or grandparents or other family members or friends, there's a cautionary tale there. And I find that fascinating. And can you maybe speak a bit more to that about how some of the consumer behaviors are changing now because of what they're viewing? Like, how would you now try to gain the attention of those cohorts?
I mean, people still want to connect in the real world. I think going back to some of that, right? COVID really pushed us in one direction, and it's time to sort of reclaim our humanity, I think, a little bit. And so we're seeing a lot more real life meetups and opportunities for people to connect and network. I think all generations, all people want to hang out with people like themselves. And so, if you're trying to target a certain demographic, create an experience, something memorable, and bring those people together. And you don't have to sell them on anything. That's again where the community flywheel model is really important, I think, in today's marketing. But the other thing too that I wanted to raise was, we're seeing now a lot of AI generated avatars and influencers, right? So you flip through Instagram, some of those people that you're looking at that look perfect, they're actually not people. They look like, they're fake, right? They're AI generated. And we're seeing, the Vancouver airport, for example, actually has does digital twin of the airport, right? This concept of a digital twin. I think we're going to start seeing individuals doing that. So where you don't want to necessarily expose yourself, where you don't necessarily want to have, yourself constantly in the mix trying to push all this content out. Maybe we're going to have AI trained on our own data, on our own socials, and be able to kind of put forward yourself, but an avatar of yourself to, handle all that. And we're going to start seeing, I think, a little bit more of, individuals having digital twins, and sort of what does that mean and how does that work? But it's definitely coming.
That's really fascinating. Like, I've heard of digital twins, but it's usually more of in the area of an average of a set of people. So, like, how would these people react to this? How would those people react to that? But the idea that a digital twin will just be focused on you, and you can now have this online. I mean, it's sort of like I had a previous guest here who spoke about people becoming tokenized. Right. And so you're just going to be on the blockchain, and depending on how well you do, there'll be tokens that are issued for you. And I feel like it's kind of crazy and interesting, but it almost seems as though we're being like ripped into like some two very different areas. So like one is like hyper AI and digitization, and the other is like, nope, as you mentioned, I want to be in the middle of the woods in a cabin. And so how do you operate in that type of world in an effective manner and try to strike a balance?
I personally do bonsai. So I got into it during COVID, and I was like, and it was in a response to NFTs. So as I was learning about NFTs and tokenizing sort of digital assets and bringing permanence to something that's digital, I thought this is a really cool concept. What's the natural version? What's the non-digital version of that? And I was thinking, well, if you can miniaturize a tree, put it in a pot, you could bring it around. If the world, went up in flames tomorrow and I was the only one left with the only apple tree, you know what I mean? Like, it's sort of like a little miniature version of nature. So I was kind of, that's what got me into bonsai, but now I'm just into it because it's so meditative, and just being able to, it's gardening, but with trees over, 20 years, as opposed to, digging in a garden with flowers. So it's a longer process. It's taught me a lot more patience, and it's, you're in nature while you're doing it. So yeah, that's been sort of how I do it. I think everyone needs to find that outlet.
That sounds amazing. And to your point, I feel that in order to stay grounded, for most people at least, I'm sure there's some variances there, but you need to have moderation. You need to have at some point where you go outside and touch the grass, but also that you're able to enjoy the more modern amenities. So if you want to like I've know a fair number of gamers, and they'll just like stay locked in their basement for like the entire weekend, and they're just there playing this game, and it's sort of like you, you need to learn that it's okay to like pause, or to like when you're finished maybe one game before you start the next, to go outside and maybe take a walk and breathe. And um, I think that balance is really important. And there are a lot of people who are having a difficult time achieving it. And so, your example about the bonsai tree, like I think it's amazing, because that's something that will requires its own special set of skills. And it teaches you things, and you can I'm sure it requires a fair amount of care, but like you don't have to like have a set schedule for that. Like you can actually go and do it as needed. And that's an outlet that a lot of people need. Like they need to find something like that, whether it be like for me, like I really enjoy fitness. So working out is a part of my life. And if I don't do it for a certain days in a row, like you can tell based on my mood that, she hasn't worked out. And so when I think about that, and then I look at things like social media and the fact that you have things like fitness influencers, you know, obviously there's some who may not be giving the most healthy advice, but there are others who are. And I feel that people sometimes just need something that they can connect with and say, okay, you know what? Like if this person can work out 4 times a week, then so can I. Like they have something to mark themselves against.
Yeah, yeah, I see that. I mean, I've killed a lot of trees doing bonsai, right? So I think there's always going to be a trial and error and some learning when you try these kinds of things. But you got to find what you love. I was similarly kind of finding myself really like angsty and kind of getting angry at my kids. And I realized it was because I hadn't played basketball that week, so I think we do need those things, and it can be easy. I play video games too. Like I have a regular Monday night video game with some friends around the world. So it's a great opportunity to connect people. I think there's a lot of positives to these technologies, right? But it's all like anything, moderation, being cognizant and aware of how it works. I think being myself in media and having done this, like, I read every article in the news with a little bit of skepticism. I read, anything I watch, right? From a very early time of like Instagram, I was very aware that those Instagram models and those lives that they were living, probably if you like turn the camera the other way, that it wasn't so perfect, right? So a lot of people don't have that sort of media literacy to question what they see and what they hear and what they read. It's important. I think that's a skill set that they should be teaching in school, is media literacy, because otherwise you're getting a lot of young people who are depressed, who see all these other people with glitzy lives and perfect lives, and it's not the truth, right? It's not real. But for them, it's like, why don't I have that? I need that. And so people's own self-value and self-worth is skewed, and that's where it gets dangerous. I think it's just being aware and being knowledgeable about the fact that not all of it's real.
That's so true. Like, I feel like I have very little media literacy, to be honest, because I'm not on social media for that reason. But like when I see things on Instagram, but people show me, or if I'm just somehow scrolling and I come across something, I do think it's real. Like I didn't really understand Photoshop until very recently. As embarrassing as that might be, like I did. I'm like, oh my God, how do you look like that? That's amazing, right? And it is because again, I didn't know that you can go and like manipulate your body and your face in different ways on Instagram. So I feel, especially if we think about the younger generations, and if we're talking about health, like that's dangerous. Like you're showing them images that are just not realistic. And now, um, I'm sure that little boys have issues as well with this stuff. But like, as a girl, I can speak about girls and say that what, especially when you're like a preteen girl or a teenage girl and you get onto social media, like it can be very difficult to like be going through certain changes in your life and you're seeing someone else who just looks absolutely perfect and you don't, and it's very demoralizing and disheartening. So to your point of introducing media literacy and teaching them that these things are not real in school, I think is very important so that they don't feel bad needlessly. Like there's no reason to feel bad about something that you see on Instagram because, as you mentioned, there's a high probability that it's not real.
Yeah. And as VR and stuff like that get more real, right? People are going to start living like second lives essentially in the metaverse or in, these virtual digital realms. You know, it's going to be harder and harder to detach from those things and to be able to also understand that, what's the real world and what's not. I mean, it's a philosophical question because if you truly enjoy being in this virtual world, it could be real to you. But so I don't want to dismiss that, but I also want, people to understand that you can't feed yourself digital pixels, right? You have to still eat food and you still have to drink water and you still need human touch and you still need, to look people in the eyes. And we still need to be human at the end of the day, right? So that's the challenge. And young girls, young boys too. I mean, we're seeing a lot of young people just generally just being confused about what they're seeing and what they're believing. And there is, again, the younger generation is pushing back a little bit on some of that. You look at, I think, is it Billie Eilish, the singer, right? She dresses, very baggy. Like she does not want to, sell like the sexualized version of what a lot of young pop stars will do. And I think that really endears her to a lot of young people because, they don't want that. And so that demonstrates a certain amount of literacy on their part too. And this goes same with the flip phones, like I was saying. They're purposely trying to detach a little bit and again, touch grass and be in the real world, which it gives me a bit of hope, to be honest, for that next generation. And I think it might be because they're the kids of Gen X, right? I'm a Gen X, so like the last generation where we played out in the streets and we didn't really get introduced to digital technologies until maybe high school or university and stuff like that. So we had that sort of youth, scraping our knees and playing in the forests, and then the still understand technology and stuff. So we've been able to kind of balance those two worlds. And our kids, my kids don't have phones. My kids get very structured video game time and stuff like that. So I think hopefully, parents are starting to learn, what to teach their kids and how to expose them to certain, healthy behaviors.
Yeah, definitely. I feel that, as I say, it does start at home, but it can also be difficult because your kids do go out into the world, and based on what they're exposed to there, it can create challenges. It's funny that you mentioned the metaverse and VR, and I think that's another very interesting realm. Um, I, for instance, was astonished when I learned that people were buying real estate in some of these worlds. I think it was in Decentraland, and like six figures for prime like real estate. And I was like, but you're never gonna be able to like physically touch it. But to your point, there are some who may spend so much time in that universe that it becomes real to them. And like how do you properly balance that? Like that's a question that's going to need to be answered at some point. But when I think about Web 3D and like or Decentraland or VR or any of these like virtual universes, and then since we're speaking about marketing, the possibilities that are introduced of, what if Meta decides that they're just going to blast you with like their Meta advertisements while you're in their world, or like, what if Decentraland or some other one out there decides to partner up with someone, and now whenever you're there, it's like every 10 second or every 10 minutes, there's like a 30-second pause where you're just like these ads are spammed at you.
Yeah. I mean, Amazon Prime all of a sudden is starting to, make me watch ads. We're canceling Amazon Prime, right? So I think it doesn't matter if it's a virtual world or the real world. If companies are too salesy and just, not considerate of the experiences that the reason people are there in the first place, right? You need to be complementary to people's own impulses and the human nature that we have to be together and to enjoy our time together. And if that's in a virtual world, then don't get in the way of that. Don't put a billboard between you and your, these two friends, because those friends will go somewhere else, right? And so I think there needs to be a really fine balance and a soft touch for these things, because like we were talking at the beginning, there's so much option these days, and for every virtual world, there'll be 20 others versions coming down the road that, people will jump ship. So you have to be really careful.
Since you brought up ads, do ads work nowadays? And I ask this because, like, I walk down the streets of downtown Toronto, or whenever I'm in the concourse, there's just like ads everywhere, and it's become to the point where I genuinely like do not know what I'm looking at, just because I'm so desensitized that like I don't even pay attention to it. So I guess, do ads work, first of all? Like,
It depends. It depends on like what that means by works, right? Because like ads, you create an ad with something in mind in terms of your goals, right? And so if an ad is designed, like a car ad, for example, a lot of car ads don't sell cars. They're meant to actually reinforce that you've already bought that car. It's a brand exercise to try to build sort of that sense of longing for the brand, because that's the car I bought. So it gives you that sense of like, yeah, I made the right decision and I have trust in this brand. And so there's a lot of different reasons why you would have an ad. And I think it was Marshall McLuhan, the Canadian, who said medium is the message also, right? So ads in different formats, in different mediums, do different things. I remember the first time I went to Hong Kong, similar to what you were just explaining, I was just like, there's ads everywhere. Like, how are these even being, it was overwhelming. And it's like, why, how is this even working? But then, I sat down at a table and there was even a sticker someone had stuck to the table and I was reading it, you know what I mean? And so you kind of, they don't always work. Sometimes they work. Sometimes they do what they're supposed to do. Sometimes they're just there to just make you feel good as a company. There's a lot of advertising is sort of companies spend money just because they think that just to make them feel good about, oh, hey, look, there's my ad, and a lot of PR is done like that too. It's like, oh, I want to be in the newspaper. I want my company to be in the newspaper. It's not the right reason, but it's sometimes a reason. So it's interesting when you've been in this industry long enough, there's any number of reasons why people will create ads or place ads, but they may not always be for, effective reasons or the right reasons, but.
well, it's funny because you brought up the Super Bowl earlier, and now we're talking about like ads being effective or for the right reason. Like, when I first learned about how much it cost to have like a 30-second slot at the Super Bowl, my mind was blown. I was like, are you serious? Like, that could be like your entire year's budget right there. So I suppose sometimes it is just because they want to be seen, and it's, I guess, that glamour almost of like, hey, we had a Super Bowl ad.
Exactly.
Right? That's interesting.
Yeah. There's a lot of egos that get stroked in the advertising industry.
Well, I feel like that's a lot of industries, if we're being honest. And that seems to be a very human thing,
Mm-hmm.
Having ego and pride in what you do. Now, my background, as those that watch this podcast know, that is in the wealth management industry. And I look at that industry and its evolution, and I guess overall how like the financial services area sort of advertises itself. And Canada, obviously, we know that we have like a very secure system where, regardless of like which bank you decide to go with, your money's safe, right? So that's not something that they can differentiate themselves on, is security. So what have you seen, and how are, I suppose, financial services trying to position themselves to consumers?
Yeah, Canada's an interesting case because, like you said, it's more controlled. It's more regulated. Um, Traditionally, it's been a really safe and good place to kind of keep your money and invest. But it's changing. The world's changing quickly, and I don't know how fast Canadian regulations and how fast banks are jumping on to a lot of the big trends that are happening in this space. I would hope that they're trying as opposed to just blocking, right? I do see, like in crypto, for example, the fact that you know Kraken and Coinbase and some of these platforms aren't allowed to. Canadians can't have stable coins. That was a rule that they've, there's no real explanation why, but Canadians apparently can't use stable coins. And I think there's a bit of pushback now from the industry to be like, well, like why not? Like let's rethink this. And similarly, things like open banking, right, are I don't think anyone's in disagreement about the benefits of open banking, but somehow there still seems to always be a lot of blockers or reasons why we need to have another committee to try to, think about it. And that's very Canadian, I find. But really, we're seeing a lot more self-sovereignty when it comes to people taking control of their own money. It's not just in wealth. I think a lot of, in healthcare, I think we're moving towards a lot of those things. People have these supercomputers now in their hands all the time. Why shouldn't I manage my own identity? Why shouldn't I manage my own money? Why shouldn't I, so that there is a trend that way. And that's why we're seeing a lot of these sort of platforms where people can invest and do their own stuff. When it comes to like wealth management firms and whatnot, I don't know. I think a lot of what we're seeing is just the change in this wealth transfer that's happening, right? I think it's like the world's largest transfer of wealth in history. I think I saw a number like $100 trillion is being transferred to, the next generation. That next generation, they have different priorities, right? Like we're not our parents. And so, what they're interested in, it seems to be, diversifying. They're more interested in global markets. They're more interested in, ESG, anything that's sort of, meant to give back to the environment or meant to sort of do good, social good. And so I think we're seeing also, new positioning of wealth management towards, these types of things. It's slow as well. Like we're not seeing a lot of it, but for those organizations that are starting to pivot and look at how to appeal to the next generation, I think that's something we're going to see a lot more of in the next few years.
Yes. To your point, the younger generations, they are a lot more interested in meaningful interactions, right? So ESG is quite big, and it's not just the label of ESG. It's actually knowing that there is good being done, and investing with your principles and values is important to people. And so that's been a very big trend, and I think that's a great thing. Putting money where you feel like it's doing the most good for your society is not a bad thing at all. And this cohort, to your point, is different than their parents and their grandparents, where they're not. We don't really look at like retirement planning anymore as much with the younger cohorts, right? Where traditionally, you went to your advisor and you invested, and the whole goal was, I'm going to get to retirement, and this is how much I'm going to have, and this is what I'm going to be able to do. And now it's more like, let's think about like what I want to do in 5 years versus 35 years, right? Because who knows what's going to happen in 35
Exactly.
years.
I mean, even 5 years, like people ask me, like, what's your 5-year plan? I was like, I don't know, ask me what my 5-month plan is. Cause I think the world changes too quickly, right? Like you said. And, yeah, like if people want to spend their money now also, right? So like, what's the point of saving all this money if I'm not going to enjoy it? And so we are seeing a lot more, again, experiences is a word that we hear a lot more of, memorable experiences. And the more you can create for that in your life, the more enriched you are. I don't ask for Christmas presents anymore because I don't need more stuff, right? I want like take me on a trip or bring me, like let's go to a hockey game or something, that I can remember and have a good time with someone that I care about. I think there's much more value in that sort of stuff. And so we are seeing that to be a general trend also, is just people are starting to become less materialistic, which is great, I think. I mean, it's good for the environment, and it might not be great for, certain brands and things like that, but maybe it's time we dial that back a little bit.
But it is, again, about things that are meaningful. And as for materialism, there will always be material things, but it might, one of the things that I'm an environmentalist myself. I love being outdoors in nature One of my favorite activities is hiking. So I want to do everything that I can to protect the nature that brings me so much joy. And one of the things that drives me absolutely insane is fast fashion.
Mm.
Because it's just terrible where you're meant to wear this thing maybe 2 or 3 times and then it's gone. Or sometimes even once, you throw it in the washing machine and it's done. And then it's going to go and sit in a landfill somewhere. And it's awful. So I feel that this trend of moving towards things that are more meaningful and buying things that, perhaps instead of buying something that is a bit more expensive, but that will last you much longer and is a better move than just wanting something different constantly. And of course, this also comes back to personal preferences, but that is an area where I'm seeing some movement, and that makes me happy because I'm glad that people are thinking about the choices that they make. Because for a long time, I don't believe anyone has any nefarious reasons for the things that they do. It's more that they just don't think about those things or
Mm.
they're not aware. And there has been a lot more awareness towards this issue, which has made me happy. Um, but also to your point about things changing very quickly and people now wanting to focus on the short term, that has been a big shift within. I feel pretty much within every industry, but particularly within wealth management and financial services, because that's where people's money sits. And so,
Mhm.
what do I want to do with it? And it's very true that there are many who now think about what do I want to do with this money now versus 10 years from now. And you brought up wealth transfers. The next inheritors of wealth will be the women because they
Mhm.
will be the ones that are the surviving partner, and they're interested in experiences.
Mhm.
Like they don't want to just leave a will and say, okay, I'm going to give this grandson or this nephew or niece an X percentage. They want to take that trip with their
Yeah.
family members, and they want to have that experience, and they want those memories. And I think that's a great thing.
Yeah. I mean, my parents want to spend it on golf, and um, it's it's definitely changing how people their relationship with money. I think is changing, and I think it's interesting and it's important because as things like AI, I don't have really an opinion on things like universal income and that sort of stuff, but like there's these people are trying new models and they're looking at new ways of doing these kinds of things, and we might end up moving into a place where if we have computers and AI doing the work for us, then what are we going to do with our own time? What are we going to do for ourselves? And so hopefully there's a renaissance. We get back into doing art and bonsai and positive things, as opposed to buying stuff and trying to fill that hole in our heart with material goods. And to the topic of like fast fashion and whatnot, like there's a lot of stuff that is disposable like that. And I remember being a kid and I had my jeans patched up 20 times before I would hand them down to my brother. So, um, and it's true. It's very convenient to outfit my kids in, stuff from fast fashion brands. Um, where do you find quality clothes? Like there, but you're right. There are now, boutiques and stores online that you can go specifically to find stuff that's made really well. And I think those things, people should seek those out more.
I completely agree with that. Uh, so I feel like we do keep coming back to AI, and that's because it is just everywhere. And it's sort of like, how do we leverage it properly is the main question that we return to. And so during the last episode, I had Murtaza Haider, a professor from MTU, come in, and he spoke about, yes, AI may replace jobs. I don't believe it's going to be in the numbers that people fear it will be. I think it'll be smaller percentages. But we discussed this idea that, and you also alluded to this will now give people time to actually do other things, more meaningful things that will benefit society more greatly than perhaps, punching numbers all day or doing some other thing that you may not even enjoy doing, but you have to. And I feel like that will create a happier society, and a happier society can actually is a better society, but there's also more positive output where I think that this will lead people to create more things that will make our lives better. And so it's sort of like let AI do a bit of the grunt work that no one wants, and let's focus on like those meaningful things that people do want, and focus on creating a better world for ourselves. I mean, you and I had discussions before, but like there's a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of different systems that tends to be the bottleneck and makes things less pleasant.
Hmm.
And so imagine if now you can implement AI and remove that bureaucracy and get things to move at a
Can't
decent
wait.
pace.
Can't wait. Yeah, I'm not. I'm not a. I don't. I don't fear technology. It's a tool, right? I think people are. People won't lose their jobs to AI. People will lose their jobs to people with using AI, right? And so I think we should all be getting familiar with it, getting used to it as a technology, and trying to see how we can apply it. Um, and then, like you said, Bright Birch was built on this idea of people want to do work the way they want to work, and a lot of our members are they have side hustles, and they have they'll do some consulting on the side, and they have that extra time now, and I think that sometimes they need to supplement their income also. It's the reason, but um, it's there will come a time where we're going to have more free time because of the way that technology works, and we're in a knowledge economy. I mean, you're still going to need people who can do construction, and there's going to be still a lot of need for those kinds of jobs. But in the knowledge industries, yeah, who knows what's going to happen? It's going to be very interesting to see over the next few years. And it's not just AI. Like I think there's like a confluence of different technologies that are all seem to be maturing at the same time, which is also super intriguing for me. Which is like, say, for example, if you were to have a quantum computer, which is, that technology's, I think IBM might have shipped the first, uh, commercial quantum computer recently. And so once you start plugging quantum computers into AI, right, and giving it that extra, power to model many billions more things in a second. At the same time, you have like edge computing, and so just the technology that goes into the cameras and the refrigerator and like things like that are just in your house or in the streets. And then you have things like VR and being able to go into like these virtual worlds, and then blockchain, which creates these immutable data so that it'll make the AI cleaner and less hackable, right? So I think there's a lot of these kind of technologies that are all maturing at the same time. It's going to be really interesting to see over the next probably decade, like how they start. Oh, the other one too is fission, right? Like just being able to take the power of the sun and use that to power things. Like they're building these nuclear reactors now that are quite small, like the size of a room, that you can move around and power things. So like just even the way that we're looking at energy and power is also shifting very quickly. So there's just some really interesting, exciting things happening. And yeah, a lot of it's happening in the other parts of the world. They're not really happening. Canada does really well in like certain instances when it comes to like the academic side of things. We're usually at the forefront of a lot of this stuff, but the rest of the world's actually applying it. So